Hey folks, welcome back to Eigen Designs. I'm your host Mark, and today we're going to be taking some scrap wood and turning it into some cast iron skillet slabs. Shout out to my Instagram follower, Liberty Lumberworks, who gave me the idea after I ran a poll on Instagram. And while I'm making these, I'm going to spend some time in this video talking about some of the material and design considerations if you want to start batching out large quantities of projects using your CNC. This is helpful for an individual creator who's just trying to prepare for the holidays, or for a small business owner that's trying to maximize the revenue output from the CNC. If you want to see how I'm doing it, stick around and I'll show you how. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a hard time letting go of scraps and offcuts from old projects. Probably to a fault. I may end up on hoarders one day. But the nice thing about a project like this is it allows you to use a bunch of these old scraps, incorporate them into a beautiful project, and clear out that inventory of old wood. So today we're going to be putting the table saw to work by setting the table saw fence to 1 inch and then ripping all of the pieces of scrap wood through the table saw. This 1 inch is going to provide a consistent height for all the pieces of scraps running through so that it can then be incorporated into a panel glue up. The scraps will be different widths, but they'll all be the same height of 1 inches. Once I've got all the scraps cut, I then take the time to run them through the jointer and then the planer, just to make sure that the mating edges on both sides are nice and flat and parallel with one another, so you eliminate any of the visible seams once the panel glue-ups are done. It's also a much more effective use of your time to batch out larger quantities of each of these steps at the same time, because a lot of the time that you spend is in the setup and in the preparation. So if you get into a groove of running things through the jointer, it's just as easy to do 50 as it is 20. So once that's done, I then arrange them into a pattern that allows me to create panels that are 5 inches by 12 inches. Then it's time to glue up the panels using some parallel clamps and some Titebond 3. Before taking the panels over to the CNC, I take the time to run each one of them through the jointer to put a nice flat surface on the bottom side of each of the panels, and then I run them through the thickness planer to get them down to exactly 3/4 of an inch thickness. The actual thickness that you plane your stock down to doesn't really matter, but it is important that you keep all of your pieces consistent thickness to make the batching operation of the CNC work flawlessly. Once the planing is done, I head over to my crosscut sled to cut off the excess pieces. I use the reference markers on my crosscut sled to make sure that the pieces that I'm cutting off are at least 12 inches long, because that's what my CNC design is going to need. This is an optional step, but I'm doing it so that I can maximize the number of pieces that I'm able to fit in the cuttable area of my CNC. Now I'm showing this out of order because I completed the CNC design prior to milling the stock, so I knew what dimensions I needed. But I do want to draw your attention to some of the design features that were built into this that are very conducive to batch operations. The first is I designed one and built many. So I spent my time up front in the CAD software, and then I let the CNC carve everything out on its own. I also minimized the number of tool changes I had, since that requires a manual intervention. And I created some tool paths that let the CNC do the majority of the work. Also, I was able to remain productive while the CNC was in operation. So to carve out 8 different skillet slabs, it takes about an hour. During that time, you can be preparing the stock for the next set of batch runs that you're going to do. So all the cutting, planing, jointing, glue ups, all of that can take place while the CNC is running. And then you can leapfrog from one operation to another to keep your CNC constantly fed with stock that you can use for these types of batch operations so that you're both efficient and effective. Okay, now onto the carving. I secure each one of the panels in place by using some painter's tape and some CA glue. This has become my go-to method for securing pieces onto the spoil board, particularly when there's a contour cutout involved and you're cutting all the way through the base stock material. Once everything is secured, I align my CNC and set it to run, and then I go focus my time and attention on some other things in the shop to remain productive. Few finishing touches before we can apply the finish to these skillet slabs. I hit each one of these with 180 grit sandpaper just to take off any burrs and get rid of any marks left behind by the different router bits. I try to get into a routine where I'm effective with my time spent sanding and I don't spend more than a couple of minutes per board. To soften some of the sharp edges on the boards, I head over to my router table and use a 1/8 inch roundover bit just to put a nice soft roundover on each of the edges so that it's comfortable to pick up and has a more finished look. I finish each one of these skillet slabs by submerging them in mineral oil. Now I buy this in bulk from a pharmacy, that way you don't pay the premium for having a designated cutting board mineral oil. And then I set up a small assembly line to make real quick work of this finishing process. The last step in this process is to create the cast iron skillets that will go inside the slabs. And this is easier than you might expect. You just need to take your hand, put it on the mouse, drag your cursor over to the buy button on Amazon, click that, and 2 days later, you'll get a package show up at your front door, and boom, you're done. So after about 4 hours of time invested, here are 8 skillet trays that I batched out using the steps provided in this video. If I ever wanted to repeat a batch like this, it would take a lot less time because the design work has already been done, so it's just a matter of milling up some stock again and then pressing play on the CNC. But hopefully after watching this video, your gears are starting to turn about what else can be batch produced on the CNC using this same workflow. And if you're one of those people that's on the fence about whether or not you want to buy a CNC to add to your workshop full of tools, This helps provide some perspective on what kind of monetization you can expect from a CNC if you're looking to recover some of the costs of the initial investment. Alright, that's going to be it for this particular video. If you liked it,
please smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm.
It's a free way to support my channel and it really helps out a lot. Alright, I'll see you on the next one.